Welcome to Governance and Development Conversations, brought to you by the African Network for Environment and Economic Justice and Edge. In today's episode, we dive into a crucial issue at the heart of our democratic fabric: citizens' engagement and democracy shrinking civic space. As democratic governance continues to evolve in Nigeria and across Africa, citizens' ability to actively engage in national conversations and hold leaders accountable remains central. However, growing concerns around restrictions on civil liberties, the setting of decent and reduced space for civil society activities are alarming signs of democratic regressions. Joining us to unpack this timely conversation is Reverend David Ugolo, the Executive Director of ANEDGE and a renowned voice in civil society advocacy. He's a clergyman, and he brings his expertise and grassroots experience to help us better understand how shrinking civic space threatens democracy and what can be done to restore citizens' power and their hope. Good evening, Reverend Ugolo.
Thank you, my brother.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, by the way, I'm your host, Daniel Praise Osedebami. I'm standing for your regular host, Dr. Sonny Duke Okosun. Now, let's begin in the conversation, Reverend Ugolo. How would you define civic space, and why is it fundamental to thriving democracy?
Thank you very much. The civic space is can be defined broadly as the space where civic actors, that is civil society, non-state actors, are able to engage government institutions, because democracy functions when the institutions are able to perform their obligations. And for civic space to be seen as enabling is for civil society to be able to carry out their campaigns, their protests, their assembly, without any harassment, without any intimidation. I give you an instance. In a situation where people who have a contrary opinion with governments, and because they put this position on the public space and government go after them, such space you will target as a shrinking space, a space that is not viable. And the implication is that investors consider that as a variable for taking decisions to come to such a society. Because a society where people cannot speak out their mind, it's difficult for you to guarantee for people to have a different view. And when businessmen can't operate in such environment, and it will become too difficult for them to bring in their resources to come and invest in such society. And so you can see that investors, businessmen, they put a lot of resources to analyze any climate before they go into such a space to invest. And that's why as civil society, our campaign is always to encourage government to create the enabling environment for us to act. And internationally, you have seen that institutions, World Bank, UNDP, they all invest resources around the world just to track data that will help to identify space that are free, that is enabling, and to encourage people with the capital to move in such environment. And if you look at the difference between a country that is developed and a country that is developing, or a country that is not developed, or a failed state, you will see that a country that is developing, there is an enabling environment, and the space is sufficient enough for people to be able to articulate and engage.
With your analysis of developed and developing countries, as far as the civic society is concerned, what are the indicators that are showing that Nigeria is not really finding its foot in the civil world?
Well, you can see, it points very clearly. If you look at the human development indicator, for example, you look something like education, the quality of education, and then you see the health status of Nigeria. If you look at globally, you see that Nigeria is not really doing well. And then if you look also the governance indicator, that's another good variable to look at the civic space in Nigeria. It's not also very friendly. And if you take and you zero deep in for the governance indicator, you're talking about, for example, participation. when government wants to make policy, how often do they engage the people?
Okay.
And how often do they consult with the people? And then when you look, one key government policies that you would look that will reflect government consultation with the people is the budget. And there are organizations international like Open Budget. They track how government is able to engage and how government makes sure that there is transparency and accountability, because how government open up the budget space is very important. If the government consult with the people's participation will influence amount of resources that is invested in a particular sector that will benefit the people.
Okay.
But if government don't create that space, it becomes difficult. And that's why you see that people hardly want to support military regime. Like what you have in Rivers State today, I am sure that in the next few weeks, you will see that the Rivers State people will be so unhappy, because it's not a good way to lead anywhere. Because you will see a classical space that is shrinking as civic space is Rivers State. And you know,
a classical example.
A classical example is a poster child of an environment that is shrinking. Because now that you have a military man as a sole administrator in Rivers State, the possibility to engage is not there. Civil society are not consulted. Even free space to discuss issues and to engage government is not there. And that is really, really bad. And that, for me, is something that will raise an alarm, because it's not good. It's a bad way to begin to move Nigeria, because it does send wrong signal that things are not going well.
Okay.
And the implication is that the people will become victims.
Okay, now, to an extent, CSO, they are like the middlemen between the people and the government. So what role should they play in promoting citizens' engagement in governance?
That's exactly what we're doing in ANEG. ANEG, having been established about 30 years ago, we've been involved in promoting democratic values, creating institutions, and even in Edo State, where our headquarters is based, we've been involved in quite a number of engagement with government. And we help government to engage on policy, space, discussion around budgeting. We also engage the parliament sometimes, and then we use the opportunity to demand some accountability status. For instance, in the previous regime, we also try to engage for government to sign on to civic engagement. For example, the Open Government Partnership, OGP, and that provides the opportunity for the government to make some commitment by something like access to information, to create access to information law that enables citizens to be able to access information. Because a society where the citizens are not informed, they are deformed, and they are not able to engage. So, for example, if government allocate 20 or 30 billion to a certain infrastructure, it's only when citizens are aware they are able to know that government is doing something. So it's also in the interest. There is a mutual benefit for the government, for the governed, and for everybody. Because a society that the information is not flowing, and people don't have access to information, you see, opposition can easily mislead the people, and then it can create a bad perception for the government. And that brings us to the issue of trust. When government operates without trust, it's a really big challenge. The legitimacy of any government is to build trust. And once trust is missing in the architecture of governance, then you can't find a sustainable democracy. And that's why we continue to encourage government that in the long run, for your legitimacy to increase as somebody who governs people, first of all, create that trust. And to create that trust is, first of all, provide opportunity for people to have access to information. And that's why we are advocating for access to information. And that's why we are advocating for government to sign on to be open government partnership. And when you sign on to this partnership, there is a multi-stakeholder framework to encourage people to engage, and that helps to open up the space for engagement. And once people begin to engage, it increases the legitimacy of the government to operate. And once government is able to operate with that legitimacy, you will see increasingly it have impact on the tax net. People on their own voluntarily will want to pay their tax, because government function can only increase when government have enough resources. Forget about this oil-based economy. And what I mean by this is that, you know, naturally all the sub-states in Nigeria, they rely on monthly allocation. But a government that will really develop, and that's why you see that it's only Lagos State and few other states that go beyond this monthly allocation, that's actually creating a fairer state where people can easily see and feel development. But a society that does depend on monthly allocation, I can assure you that they won't be able to guarantee a development.
Now, let's quickly address the issue of people or citizens seeing CSO as those who are after their own stomach well-being. They don't really go after the well-being of the people. Let's strike a balance now.
No, I want to challenge you. You know, I work for civil society. I've established an edge for over 30 years ago with credible people. We've paid our due. We've worked very seriously. We have done well very successfully. And I used to tease my friends in politics or in any other profession that if I was to be in civil service, I would be at least a permanent secretary. And if I was to join the military, I would be a major general.
By now?
Yeah, by now, yes. Because yes, I'm telling you, 30 years on the field. That's not a field joke. And so to play this role, to speak out truth, to defend truth, to speak for the people, it's not a joke. It's not an easy job. We are victims. We pay price for it. To be a whistleblower in the society, we pay price for it.
Okay.
And without the work we do, you can't talk about democracy. We've suffered for it. You know, so people should value the work we do. And internationally, everywhere around the world, activists are valued. And that's why you see people in overseas, when they want to die, they will their asset in putting it in a foundation that supports an ideal society. And even people are alive. Look, George Soros, for example, invested millions of dollars in George Soros Foundation that is funding democracy, opening up the economy globally. Look, Ford Foundation. These are people who have also earned money in their business, but they think that if the society must grow, you must support people who are promoting society that will create an enabling environment. And so when you see people who stick out their neck to speak truth to power, it's not an easy way to go about in life.
Definitely.
And so when you see civil society, I give you an example. If you look the difference between Edo State and Delta State and River State, what happened in River State cannot happen in Edo.
Why?
The difference is that the level of activism in Edo is high,
okay,
compared to River State. For example, a police officer can easily kill somebody in River State and just go scot-free. But it can't happen in Edo.
Because people are there to
Because
speak.
the next thing you will see thousands of people in the police command. And so the level of awareness of activism in Edo is high. And that impliedly raises the democratic value of the society. And just to give you an example, our colleague and senior comrade who had an engagement with the police, and unfortunately he passed away. And we raised our voice and said, this is unacceptable. And this is Papa Ebogbo, the former NSC chairman. Do you know that in less than 24 hours, the governor of the state went to his house? And as I speak now, not just that the governor went to his house, the governor on his own encouraged the family and came out as a human being. I was very impressed how the governor responded within 24 hours to deal with the challenge. And that is what a democratic society is. That is how governance is fed by people. And if you talk to the family of Ebogodi today, they will tell you that, yes, they really appreciate how the government responded to what that happened between their father and the police. And that's what I'm saying, that in a society where you have a strong civil society, you will see governance in real play in terms of impact with people.
All right, if you're just tuning in, it's still governance and development conversations here on ITV. We're back after this break. Welcome back from that break. It's still governance and development conversations sponsored by ANEJ. And we have one of their very top executives speaking to the issues this evening, Reverend David Ogolo. Thank you so much, Reverend David Ogolo.
Thank you very much.
Okay, now let's move on now. How does limited civic engagement affect public trust in democratic institutions and governance process?
Well, for example, when governments do not create the enabling environment for people to participate in governance, people don't trust that government. And when the trust is low, the legitimacy of the government to operate and license to operate or to govern reduces. And once government legitimacy reduces in the eyes of the people, nobody trusts such government. One, people don't pay tax. Two, people don't support the government. And once government don't get support, within a short period, you will see the impact on the governance. And so that's why we think that the issue of trust, and that's why in Europe, in the OECD country, the OECD governments, they invest so much money measuring trust, trying to carry out analysis about how people feel about government policy. It's only in this part of the world where you see that government will just announce policy without going out to carry out survey.
Without consultations.
Without consultation and without knowing what the people feel about it. Feedback is very important for governance. Government must invest in feedback, particularly in this digital age. Government must feel the pulse of the people so that when they carry out policy, they carry out project, they carry out program, how is the people feeling? It's something that the government must take note of. Otherwise, government cannot be investing money in certain particular project. But that's not what the people want. That's not what the people want. Okay. I give you an example. There's a World Bank project in the previous regime, which the flooding in Edo State, the flooding in Benin City. But do you know that in the previous government, they carry out this project and put some small lake around the city. But as I speak to you now, the damage that project have done, for example, the entire Ogumeyin community down to Amagba, over 100 houses has been damaged. And this is a World Bank project. We're taking this up now with this present government. So you can imagine that
the project didn't favor the people
at all. But the government has gone to collect loan from the World Bank, funded this project in an attempt to defraud. But invariably, because of lack of consultation with the people, created a lake in Ogumeyin community and never created an enabling environment for government to consult with the people. And anytime it rains now, it overflows.
And towards that place.
And when it overflows, over 100 houses has gone down the drain.
So how do we
correct? You can imagine, you can see the boomerang of such government policy. The people in that entire community, the people in entire places there, they don't feel good about government. They don't feel good about the policy. But this was a policy that was supposed to be carried out to help the people. But it has now endangered the life of the people. That's why we always encourage government. Always consult with the people. Allow the people to have feedback. Because most cases, the governor, the speaker, the people in position, they don't have access to this feedback. It's only a governor that knows what he's going to do to achieve, that designs a framework that guarantees engagement. And that's why we advise government. And that's one of the purpose of this our program. Create an enabling, create channels, create a feedback. Allow people tell you how they feel about your policy. I know that people can easily, label people who have contrary view as no their opposition. That's not true. You need the opposition's feedback. You need all stakeholders' feedback so that there can be ownership. So like this project I mentioned to you now, as we speak now, anytime it rains, these people, you can only imagine the suffering that these people is out there going. That entire houses, from Ogumeyin down to Amagba. And these are hard-earned money they use in building those houses. How painful it is because of lack of government planning, lack of government consultation, because it's a short-term gain. When government is embarking on policy, it has to be win-win. Both those is going to benefit, and what will be the implication? And that's why the World Bank, if you go to the World Bank policy of consultation, it's a fundamental step they take before they embark on project. And so I was wondering, why did it happen in Edo State, the World Bank project? This is the impact today is having on the people. How can the government address that? Because the people has responsibility to cry out for government to come and see how this World Bank project has caused them pain. And that is a classical story on how we must not allow government to embark on a policy without consultation. And the people themselves, I used to answer that for democracy to function very well, the people also have responsibility. And that's why I must thank ITV for creating this opportunity for us to analyze some of this government policy and begin to provide a feedback. The people must get organized.
Okay.
If you don't get voices organized and reclaim your space, it will be difficult for government to listen to you. Because if you allow the elite, and that's why we also try to encourage the people, don't allow the elite to dictate the policy space. If they dictate, normally you will see that they will take control, particularly in the patron-client culture. What I call patron-client culture, we live in an economy because an oil-driven economy. This patron-client, if you are not part of government, you don't benefit. And when such a system continues to grow in the economy, what happens? Talent and success disconnect.
Okay.
And what I mean by talent and success disconnect, a society where you don't allow merit to reign, you never can see success and development.
Let's quickly talk about the plight of our CSO. With increasing reports of intimidation and harassment of activists, what protection should exist for civil society and the actors?
Let me give you an example. In the previous regime, I am sure that you know Tony Kabaka.
Definitely.
He was maybe on the other side of the government. And you saw what happened to his hotel he built.
It was alleged that it was built on
let's say something.
It was alleged that he built on the wrong place, on the wrong land.
Come on. If he was a pro Obaseki that time, would they destroy the hotel? No, if Tony Kabaka was pro Obaseki in his 8 years, will Obaseki ask his people to go and destroy that hotel?
Who knows? Maybe.
So, how many hotels did Obaseki destroy? So, the question is that, and that's what happened during Obaseki regime. And that's another black aspect of that regime. And that's why we are appealing to this government to be careful with people that are around them. Because we that have a contrary view to government, we shouldn't be treated like that. When people have contrary view on your policy, they don't hate you. Like Showore, for example, my friend, he doesn't hate the government. But you see, when you don't do things right, we have a responsibility to speak out. If this governor is not doing well, we should speak out. For example, the last time I appeared here, I think it was with you.
Definitely.
I raised the question of security vote. That the government should invest the security vote to build the security architecture that will create an enabling environment for business to thrive in Edo State. I went further to also say that the things that was done properly in Obaseki time, something like the vigilante, this government should sustain it. It should not politicize it. As we speak today, crime is increasing, kidnapping is increasing in Edo State. And this is not good for this government. You cannot be having what happened in Nairobi, and you say you go to Lagos or you go to abroad, say you are attracting investors. Who is investor that will come to Edo State?
Okay. All right, we don't really have time. Time is not always our friend on the show. So how can we now build trust between the people, the government, and CSO?
Protect the citizens.
Okay.
Don't use government power to oppress the citizens. Don't single out activists and oppress them. What happened to Tony Kabaka during Obaseki regime, don't extend it to this regime. Otherwise, the regime will be labeled. You see the way the regime ended, and you can see the perception of the people. Your legitimacy to operate is to allow the space for people to hold their view. And then let people contest. In the process of contesting of idea, the best will triumph. And that's one of the things I like in my friend, Adam Oshomole. He believes very strongly that he has capacity to put his policy on the table and succeed. But you know, this native way of behaving, I call it native way. If a man have a contrary view to you, you don't need to use your government power to undermine him.
Okay, Reverend. We need to wrap up now.
Thank you very much.
Well, we've been speaking with Reverend David Ugolo, Executive Director of ANEJ. This is how far we can go on the program. We hope to see you on the next one. My name is Daniel Praise Osedebame. Bye for now.